Hello, everyone. I'm Father Alexander Har,
And I remember who I am this time. I'm the very Reverend David Marshall.
and this is A Bridge Between. The title has not changed, where we are bridging our physical distance, bridging our distance as clergy during this sign and time of Advent into Christmas.
Yep.
And we're working overtime.
Working overtime. Yeah, we sure
Right.
are. Well, it is the season.
Yeah.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. I don't know why I
Exactly.
started that low. I shouldn't have. What was I thinking?
I don't know. But it is interesting because we're working overtime because we've got what came out for the 22nd,
Hmm.
which should already be out and about by the time people are watching this one. But we've got to do something for Christmas Eve / Christmas Day because we know a lot of preachers. Almost every preacher who would be listening to us is doing Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and um, you've got a great story that you have shared before,
Hmm.
which I look forward to you sharing again, and then I'll talk a little bit about what I'll be doing, and we'll go from there.
That sounds good. And the point of our broadcast today is to help those with preaching on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. And I even spoke with a bishop recently who was pondering what to preach on Christmas because it's something, frankly, that makes us a little nervous. It is a hard service to do. And the other interesting thing for those outside of the ministerial world, occasionally we make the joke about, hey, the good news is Easter falls on a Sunday this year, because Christmas hardly ever falls on a Sunday, which means we are
Yeah.
doing an Easter service midweek. So that adds to the complexity and the difficulty of the season. And then to throw a sermon in on top of that. And so I wanted to share a story with, as Alex had said, and it's because over the last year, I think we've picked up 3 new subscribers. So, okay, it's it's been a lot more than 3. It's like 4. So it's awesome. But I want to tell you a story because his name is Father Jack, and he is a retired Navy captain
Mhm.
chaplain. And so he had a gravelly voice, and I'm not exaggerating. He was at least 350 pounds. So very large man, massive kind of ZZ top beard to him, and he had a gravelly voice, and he spoke like this. And he's a Navy chaplain, so he will tell you exactly what he thinks all the time. And so anyway, it's Jack. So I was slated to preach this one Christmas. I was newly ordained, and this is my first Christmas as an ordained person. And for a variety of reasons, the rector couldn't preach. And so I was put into that spot. And I was watching the people fill in the church, and it was getting crowded. They're pulling out chairs and putting in more. And it was just, I was getting more and more nervous. And so Jack leaned out and looked outside and then looked at me, and he said, "There are a lot of people out there." And I said, "Yeah, thanks, Jack. Thanks for the reminder." "Well, they're not here to hear you preach." And I, I thought, what? And then one of our associate priests slapped him on the shoulder. "Don't say that." And he's like, "Well, it's true. They're here to say uh, that they're, they're here to get communion and to sing Silent Night and to go home. And the faster you get them there, the better."
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So, like many things, Jack is right. Unlike Easter, where people actually show up to hear this message, the message of joy and of peace and of incarnation, it's all throughout the service itself. And it finds itself within the traditions that we do. So, Holy Communion, within saying the Lord's Prayer, with singing Silent Night. And in the case of All Angels, we then end with Joy to the World, and then they go home. And the home celebration is an extension of the celebration that they had at church.
So I disagree.
Nice, good.
There you
What do
go.
you
You
mean you
see,
disagree? Okay, I don't. That's
well,
exactly
I
what Jack would
disagree.
say,
No.
but yeah.
So I disagree in as much as I think when people are coming during this time of year,
Yeah.
and you can put it in the comments and let me know if you agree with me or agree with Father Dave. But I think when people are coming around this time of year, there's so much that has been going on. They've been pulled in so many different directions.
Okay.
The secular celebration of Christmas has really been the norm. In
Right.
other words, it's what they've been working on for weeks. And all of a sudden, it feels like by going to Christmas Eve service or going to Christmas Day service, but let's talk more about Christmas Eve,
Sure.
that I'm finally, as a congregant, I'm finally, as a Christian, able to focus and get into this particular moment. And I
Right.
agree. The singing of Silent Night, the candlelight, all those things are, it's absolutely true,
Right.
right? That those things will focus you. But I've been teaching a preaching class for the last few months,
Hmm.
and I am realizing something that is very powerful.
Okay.
And that is, the preacher gets up and the Spirit of God works through them to proclaim something,
Hmm.
right? Whatever the Holy Spirit wants to proclaim in that moment
Hmm.
is what needs to be done. And
Hopefully.
so when I think of getting up on Christmas Eve and proclaiming something, I feel like there's all these different threads, the threads of the service, the threads of people's personal prayer life, the threads of the silent night, all those things,
Sure.
and that I need to kind of put them under an umbrella, or I need to pull those threads together
Okay.
and say,
And you
and
do that
say
homiletically.
homiletically, yes.
Okay.
And so I say that yes, we are here for this purpose. I think we sometimes need to state it out loud, even if it's very obvious.
Sure.
We are here because we are celebrating a miracle. We are here because a miracle has taken place that has saved the world. That will, and we need to talk about it. We need
Right.
to put it in perspective. But I
Okay.
do agree that it needs to be simple. It needs to be straight to the point. So if you're breaking out your Saint Athanasius, do it
Right.
judiciously.
No,
You know,
right.
I'm just
Exactly.
saying, just do
Yeah.
it. And every congregation is different. Every congregation, some people in some congregations, they want a little more. But I have found, and this will be the first Christmas Eve service I do for St. John the Divine, this with this parish. So I'm kind of feeling it out.
Right.
But in years past, I have found that it really has been about tying some of those threads together for people because we feel so scattered.
Hmm. Okay. All right. So you and I don't agree on this, and I'm wondering if you didn't have a homily in Christmas, will people leave the service feeling untied, or does the liturgy itself tie things back together again?
Well, it's not so much that because I did it in that way,
Okay.
but I
Good.
think it. I think the homily takes place where it does in the liturgy for a reason. We've had the reading of the gospel, we've had the other readings, but we're
Hmm.
also now preparing to offer, to affirm our faith, offer our prayers, and do communion.
Hmm.
I think there has to be something that allows people some space to listen. And
Okay.
listening as a spiritual practice is very hard this time of year.
Hmm.
So instead of feeling like I'm actively doing something, sometimes just maybe actively listening
Hmm.
is a help.
Right.
I'm not saying that the homily is important because I'm the one doing it. I think
Right.
that the
Right.
preacher has, as part of their call, to be this proclamation. And by the way, the homily could really just be, "Isn't it great Jesus was born in Bethlehem? Merry Christmas." I mean, like if
Hmm.
that's all you feel called to say and proclaim,
Hmm.
great. But I do think that there needs to be something there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you and I certainly agree on that. And there are other Christian traditions that that they have a loud band and they play a bunch of music,
Hmm.
and then somebody preaches for 40 minutes, and then they sing a few more things, and they go. And
Yeah.
for that particular tradition, for me to say they're not here to hear you preach, they would completely disagree with me,
Hmm.
except on this point that in years past, the only time you would really participate with Christmas music would be in church.
Hmm.
And nowadays, it's piped into us when we're walking into various stores before Thanksgiving. And so there are all sorts of ways for us to engage in that type of music. But the evangelical preachers would say, but where are they going to hear the good news? Right? Where
Right.
are they going to get this to tie these things together if it's not just through music? And so now we have a liturgical structure that we can also pull things in together with the liturgy. But the other thing you and I agree on is the simplicity of the message.
Yes, yes. And I think one of the things I would point out, that even in liturgical churches, we
Hmm.
cannot take for granted that even the people who've been going there for a long time will be able to follow and digest the liturgy about in what it's about,
Right.
because we're also going to have a lot of visitors. That's the
Yep.
hope,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know. And so the liturgy can help with that, but I
Hmm.
think the simple proclamation of the good news message is going to be vital,
Hmm.
because, and I try to look at it from this perspective, we're encountering more and more people who are experiencing brokenness, people who are experiencing stress and loneliness.
Hmm.
And while the fellowship and the collegiality of the liturgy can help with that, there has to be, I think, an overt message related to that good news.
Right. Right. But they are not showing up individually to hear you and me preach.
Oh, no, I hope not.
No, no, no. So, yeah. Uh, the problem, folks, is that Alex and I like to disagree, but we're also in the ministry field of reconciliation. So, if you notice, we often will draw and pull back together again. And some of you might be yelling at your device, saying, "No, keep disagreeing." So, we'll work on that. What is your favorite homiletical structure for Christmas?
Um, Usually it's kind of like make one point and just go with it. I
As
start off,
opposed to make 3 points and go with it. I mean,
yeah, well, I'm saying like just
what's
like,
the opposite to that?
well, I mean, like what, like I just try to take like one point instead of
Okay.
3 points.
Okay.
I like to. I always start off with some kind of story or some kind of illustration that I make
Good.
during Christmas time. I think a lot because it's getting close to that time of celebrating the birthdays of my children in January and February.
Right.
I tend to think a lot about the birth of my children,
Right.
and of course the birth of this wonderful child
Yep.
named Jesus.
Hmm.
Um, and I begin to kind of orient people into this concept of coming into the world, of God coming into the world, and that while it is absolutely phenomenal and miraculous,
Hmm.
God still chooses to do something that human beings have been doing for thousands of years,
Hmm.
which is come into the world through a woman.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so I think of um, my own children being born. One of the stories I like to tell is that everybody's got a birth story. You know,
Okay. Right.
everybody's got a birth story about either how they were born or how their children were born.
Hmm.
And I usually kind of will share one of mine, either myself or my own children. And one of the ones I like to share is for our second son, Gregory. My wife leans over and says, it's time. And at 2:30 in the morning, my first response was, time for what? You know,
Right.
it's like, time for what? Like, I'm
Time,
sleeping here.
time to roll over and have 4 more hours of sleep. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. She's like, no, no,
Right.
no, it's time. And of course, then we all got into a tizzy, you know. But it's this idea of bringing the miraculous and connecting it to our physical world,
Hmm.
of saying Christ was born, and what a unique birth. But also, it's amazing that we have birth, that we have new life in this way.
Right. That we even have it this way.
Yeah.
I like to go down the secular route of talking
Mhm.
about Christmas movies, and in particular movies that aren't necessarily Christmas, but have some sort of message around a gift, something that changes somebody's life, something that's rather ordinary. I mean, lots of children get born all the time, right? But there was something that changed. And so I
You're
love
talking
to
about
take,
Die Hard, aren't you?
well,
That's a
it
Christmas
is
movie.
it is a Christmas movie after all. So, but I like to go after ones that first that I have seen. Number two, which means they're 25 years or older, um, and I do that because I'm going to ruin the ending. So I want to tell them, you've had 22
25,
years,
30 years. Yeah.
yeah, to see this movie. So let me tell you how the Wizard of Oz ends. Right? Let me tell you how these things end. Um, and so it could be a focus on a movie that changes one's perspective to then
Mhm.
see family again, Wizard of Oz. She changed the way that she viewed how she was living and where she was living and who her friends are and what is important to her. That's what Dorothy went through. So you could take my favorite Christmas movie is Wizard of Oz, right? And people are like, what? And
Yeah.
that is where you can import that type of message. Um, But
Well, I
I,
think that,
Mhm.
go ahead. Yeah.
No, no, I want to hear what you're saying.
No, what I say is I think that, what I have usually heard from my pastoral theology professors and preaching professors is that at some point we have to get people to wrestle with the reality of this child in the manger.
Okay, what do you mean by
We
that? Wrestle with the reality.
wrestle with the reality because um, the question I'm asking this Sunday of the congregation in my sermon is, do you believe in miracles?
Okay,
Because we talked about the miraculous
right,
occurring in Mary. We talked about the miraculous occurring in Elizabeth because
sure.
she was thought to have been barren. So we had this idea of God keeping God's promises.
Okay,
But a really good question that we should get people to kind of ask is, do you believe in miracles? Do you believe that God can exercise God's power in whatever way they want? You know, and if so, then what does that mean for the problems that we're facing? What does that mean for the challenges and the prayers that we offer to God? And so, what I mean by wrestling with the reality of the child in the manger
mm-hmm.
is that to believe in Jesus is to believe in the miraculous.
Mm-hmm.
To believe in Jesus is to believe in the miraculous from the very beginning of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And we're told in the secular world that, well, that's not what the text says, or they read it wrong, or it's just a legend, or my personal favorite, all these other gods were also had a virgin birth, and just try to downplay it, and,
Sure.
and try to remove the miraculous from it. And we're going to have to eventually, at some point, as Christians, at some point we have to wrestle with that question: do I believe in miracles?
Okay, that's interesting. I would be concerned that that would be too heavy of a theme for Christmas, unless one took a something from your life where a miracle had occurred, or miracles that occur all the time. For instance,
Yes, yes.
with the fermentation, is that the right word? Of how wine is made, the grapes ferment.
Mhm.
There is a mystery in that. Um, some things we just don't understand.
Right.
You add this together, question mark, and then you get wine, right? It's intriguing. So the thing that I would like to implore people to try not to do is something that, because I listen to a number of preachers and I follow what they're saying, and it's just a way of helping me develop the craft and all that, is that I hear a lot of evangelical preachers preach basically a Good Friday sermon on Christmas Eve.
Yes, I
Yeah,
understand
right.
what you're saying.
That they are basically crucifying Jesus when talking about his birth, and part of me thinks that you can really try to separate that. And the other thing that has come to mind, and again, I know other preachers who I follow attempt to solve the mystery of this type of birth and what happened. And if it hasn't been solved yet, it's not going to happen in 7 to 8 minutes on the 24th of December, right before everybody stands and sings Christmas carols. It's just not going to happen. So don't
Mhm.
attempt to do it. Um, and one thing that I'm focusing on is that a couple of weeks ago I wrote a piece about Hallmark Christmas movies, and I was not flattering with my approach to these movies because I think they set unreal expectations. Um,
Absolutely.
Someone who follows what I do had commented that this particular person has a blood pressure system that they are checking from time to time, their blood pressure. And they had noticed that in the stressful time of the season, when they watch I'll just label it a Hallmark movie, but it's not through Hallmark. You can find them on Netflix, you can find them on Prime Video, they're all over. But when they watch a movie about Christmas, their blood pressure drops.
Yeah.
Okay, that they feel centered, they feel home driven, that it's that there's a comfort there. And so these movies have a place within our structure and within our lives as a way, pastorally speaking, to bring us comfort and peace. And so I don't think our sermons should be as sappy as a Hallmark movie, but also the messages, the service, the whole liturgy, the prayers. it should be around the sense of lowering one's blood pressure and maybe even lowering one's spiritual blood pressure during this time.
I'll give you something related to that, which is um, the thing that I'll actually be talking about during the Christmas Eve service is this obsession with perfection.
Ah, okay.
We have an obsession with the perfect meal,
Yep.
having our home perfectly cleaned,
Yep.
everybody's perfect at the dinner table, all those things,
Right.
and it's not going to happen.
No.
And I think that what we will sometimes forget is that we try to prepare for things and have them be perfect, but it's just not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are called as Christians to, during this time of year, prepare a home for Christ in our hearts. And
Mm-hmm.
then I examine my heart and I realize, well, it's kind of dirty and it's kind of messed up, and it needs to be reorganized and all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
But Christ didn't come into a perfect world.
Nope.
Christ came into a broken world, and if Christ can come into a broken world, then Christ can come into your heart.
That's fantastic. So part of my thinking about Joseph is that I would imagine as he was preparing for the birth that he felt a shame and didn't, like, I can't believe this is the best I can do. She's giving birth in this stable with other animals. Like, how hard he must have been on himself. That thought crosses my mind. And it's interesting you raise what you're raising, because I was thinking about saying, what if Joseph was saying, "This is the best I can do"? That he's not giving birth out on the side of the road. It's not raining. That this is the absolute best of what I can do. Like the drummer boy who says that all I can offer the king is just this, and just let me play a little song. Like, that is the absolute best that Joseph could have done, was that level. And what if Joseph had peace with that? What
Well,
if
I
he
hope he
was?
did.
Oh my gosh, I hope he did.
You know,
And I
I
hope that Mary too was also thinking along the same lines of like, well, Joe, this is it, right? This is all we've got, and this will then be good enough. And that as we do our Christmas celebrations, whatever it is that we have done, whatever it is that we've prepared, it's going to be good enough.
and I think, and that's the kind of what I think maybe we should end on, is that as speaking to our fellow preachers,
Hmm.
um, right now is the season to just try to find fullness and completeness in what you're doing,
Yep.
and don't overstress yourself. You should try to do your best. You should put
Right.
forth effort, but you should not do so in such a way that you are going to feel um, that you've burned yourself out,
Hmm.
or also that you have put so much pressure on yourself that there's no joy in what you're doing.
Right. So I would call it the Aunt Bethany sermon. Do you know who Aunt
Yes,
Bethany
I
is?
know from
Good.
National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation,
Yes.
Aunt
And
Bethany gets up and says, "I pledge allegiance to the flag."
good. So,
On her
what
prayer.
two gifts did she bring to the Griswold household?
A Jello mold with some cat food in it, and she brings her cat.
She wrapped up her cat inside of a box, meow, as it's running around, and you can see Chevy Chase moving the box like there's a cat in there. But yeah, it's that was the best that she had to offer,
And it's
and
perfectly fine.
because Uncle Eddie really liked the Jello. Uh, Now the cat met an unfortunate end. He just spent all his 9 lives.
Yes, spoiler alert on
But
that one. You know,
oh
but
please, it's been out a long time.
I'm kidding.
That,
But so
what did
yeah,
you do
so
to my tree? Anyway, that so see, Alex, there are some movies I can quote from. You're
yeah.
welcome. Yeah. So the Aunt Bethany sermon. There we go.
So as we kind of come to the end of our time together, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas,
I would like to wish you a Merry Christmas.
and to everybody who's been with us throughout this year and throughout this Advent and now Christmas season. My prayers go with you that God just may be in your life in such a miraculous way as we have seen God coming into the world in the person of Jesus.
And I pray that the joy and the peace that the angels had heralded will find nestled within your heart and within your home and within your community.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next one.
God bless.